the national anthem, please. Thank you very much. Let's be seated, please. Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GCON, SAN, representing His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Let me welcome the members of the National Assembly that are here. Welcome to the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed. I'd like to welcome the Honorable Minister for Trade, Industry, Trade and Investment, Prince Niyi Adebayo. Also here with us is the Honorable Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Prince Clem Agba. The Chairman, Nigeria Economic Summit Group, Mr. Asue Ighodalo, is here. And I'd like to welcome all the other members of the board of the NESG. Let me welcome past presidents, and I can see a few, particularly the Pioneer Chairman, Mr. Pascal Dozier, who is here with us this morning. All members of the NESG board, I welcome you. The CEO, Mr. Laoye Jayola, and former CEOs that are here, development partners, members of diplomatic corps, captains of industry, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is with pleasure and pride that I welcome all of you to the 20th edition of the Nigerian Economic Summit. Since 1993, this summit has retained its status as a flagship event of government and business, providing a credible and widely recognized platform for forging understanding and consensus on the national economic policy direction and growth strategies. And this year will not deviate from that lofty ideal. Using the 5 pillars of economic sustainability, visionary leadership, execution, political economy, and inclusive growth, this year's theme, 2023, which is our transition year and the years beyond, to highlight the priorities that will engender shared prosperity. The vehicle that will drive our conversation the next 2 days will be the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025, a blueprint designed to unlock the country's potentials in all sectors of the economy for sustainable growth and holistic, inclusive national development. So I'd like to welcome all of you, but to welcome us is a man that has driven this in the last 2 or 3 years. Please join me as I welcome here the Chairman, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Please welcome Mr. Asue Ighodalo.
Our Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GCON, SAN. I would like to stay on all protocols so I will save on time. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this 28th Nigerian Economic Summit. I thank you for being part of our summit process and our work over the last 29 years at our annual summits and at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group itself, and for all our contributions, which have been significant to economic policy formation in our country and upheld the primacy of public-private dialogue and committed advocacy. Each day, I thank the founding fathers of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, each day. We must continue to sustain this process at the highest levels possible. The theme of this year's summit, Shared Prosperity 2023 and Beyond, is an aptly worded and succinct summation of the challenges before our country at this point in our nation's history. To share prosperity, we must be prosperous. From where we are today, we have to determine how we become a prosperous, safe, secure, and law-abiding nation, forged together as one. And as we become prosperous, we must equitably distribute and share our prosperity amongst all our people. A number of things will be asked of us at this summit. One, the adoption of a roadmap born of different thinking that will deliver prosperity, sufficient to support our vast and steadily growing population. Two, the policy framework to ensure that the equitable circulation and sharing of that prosperity amongst all our citizens is assured. Three, identification of a few things our government must do over the next 6 months in its determination to leave behind a much better country. And four, we should also agree a broad-based consensus on the basic policies that our presidential candidates must sign up to, if we as a people are to take them seriously, as persons with the capacity, understanding, intellect, and resources to run our country. To realize the goal of prosperity, we must succeed in completely transforming the Nigerian economy within a specified time frame. The Nigeria Agenda 2050, currently being drafted, proposes a time frame of about 25 years. This means that we must recalibrate our visioning and work towards a specified target growth by a specified date, benchmarking ourselves with the most prosperous countries in the world. I would propose that our specified target must be turning Nigeria into the most prosperous black country in the world, with a GDP per capita that is at par with the OECD countries by the year 2050. The purpose of such specific precision is to encourage us to first consider a different way of thinking about economic development, one that is defined not by incremental progress, but by clear, objectively measurable goals. If we took that kind of clear approach, it would mean, just based on today's OECD indices, that we will need to grow our GDP to somewhere between $4.5 trillion and $9 trillion, depending on whether we're able to remain at a population of around 220, 250, or if we grow to 450 million, that we've been projected to grow to by 2050. So, we will need to build an economy that is 10 to 20 times the $440 billion economy we have today within 25 years. We must then set ourselves a task of growing at about 15% or more every year. Successful national turnaround starts first with addressing basic internal problems and fixing them, and then setting the country's sights on externally driven growth possibilities. We must start by achieving macroeconomic stability, as this is the foundation of economic growth. Too much has already been said about this issue, so I won't go too deeply into it. Our economic competitiveness is weak. Simply put, we don't produce enough for ourselves, and so we can't produce for the world. We must take active steps to multiply our productive output, particularly in those areas that support foreign exchange earnings and enhance livelihood. We must address all areas of waste, leakage, theft, or graft. Gas flaring must stop. Only a nation that does not take itself seriously will cry out year after year for power, but continue to fritter away a resource that can deliver that power. We must think through ingenious ways of fixing and strengthening our institutions, paying particular attention to our civil service and judiciary, and work hard at changing the attitude and temperament of those of us who work in these institutions. Simultaneously, and most urgently, we must continue to tackle our national security issues with vigor, aggression, and intelligent resource deployment. A prosperous Nigeria cannot be created without decisively dealing with our security problems. I also suggest that we focus on infrastructure investments that directly power economic activity, like overhauling our deep sea ports, which are gateways to trade, or building fully gas-powered special economic zones whose return on investment is clear. We must put in place policies and incentives that attract patient capital into our economy. I also suggest that we address the problem of unequal access to basic livelihood amenities like food, water, roads that foster micro activity and enable produce to get to markets, schools that deliver solid basic education without security concerns, and basic health care. Last, but certainly not the least, we must start to seriously address in a deliberate way how we turn our vast manpower into competitive human capital by bridging the knowledge deficits and skill gaps that will be required for an accelerated future. Because the world has changed so much and we're so far behind, we must identify avenues to accelerate our growth over and beyond the ordinary, so we can consistently achieve 15% growth over the next 25 years. We must absolutely think through and articulate areas where each of our 6 geopolitical zones can be leading or significant global players in the world economy of 2050. We must take learnings from the admirable global feats being achieved by our tribe of Nigerian creatives. In these areas, we are producing for the world. Just this weekend, we saw how our American brethren were dancing to our artists at President Trump's daughter's wedding. At the 2022 FIFA World Cup, our Kiss Daniel is going to be one of the headline acts, and our movies are all over Netflix. Only new growth areas will deliver prosperity. The drafters of our National Agenda 2050 have their work cut out. As we create prosperity, we must share our prosperity amongst our people in a fair, equitable, and just manner. We must think of and design our inclusion policies and programs to be prosperity enhancing. Our programs must be aimed at leveling the playing field for traditionally excluded or disadvantaged groups. We must also institute programs that deliver protection and care for the truly unable, who through no fault of their own are unable to make a decent living. This, ladies and gentlemen, is how we must think about creating and sharing prosperity as we engage in the summit process over the next 2 days. Before I return to my seat, may I respectfully mention 3 other things. Firstly, will our government, by 29th May 2023, revisit the issues of fuel subsidy removal, review our exchange rate management policies, reduce our rate of borrowing, and focus on revenue enhancement measures without stifling the private sector, and identify appropriate mechanisms for tackling inflation, especially food inflation. I have assumed that the issues of security will continue to be decisively and effectively tackled. Secondly, to sustain our turnaround, our new government from 29th May 2023 must be ready for office and show an understanding of the critical issues. Accordingly, we must at this summit reach a broad-based consensus on certain policies and issues that our leading contenders must subscribe to. Issues such as national job creation, accelerated human capital development, social protection and development, rebuilding and rejigging our institutions, effective, efficient, and coordinated macroeconomic management, a new national security architecture, heightened infrastructure development agenda, and a clear and articulate effective response to humanitarian issues. If our incoming government does not understand and have a program for these issues, then it is not clear that they are ready for governance. Thirdly, and this is internal to us at the NESG, as part of our own ongoing contribution to the national discourse and effective policy formation and legislative reforms, the NESG has established the Ernest Shonekan Center for Legislative Reform and Economic Development. We thank Chief Mrs. Shonekan and the family for allowing us to use Chief Ernest Shonekan's name for this center. Chief Ernest Shonekan, as we all know, is one of our distinguished founding fathers. Finally, Your Excellencies, distinguished and honorable ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, having served 2 terms of 2 years each, and in keeping with our almost 3 decades tradition of seamless governance transitions, at the end of this 20th summit, I stepped down as the chairman of the NESG. Accordingly, at our last NESG board meeting, Mr. Niyi Yusuf, who has served as my first vice chairman, was elected to succeed me as the chairman of the NESG. Niyi is the managing partner, Veraki Africa, former country managing director at Accenture, and is one of the distinguished global leaders at the NESG, and has served practically all paying-to-serve roles within the NESG. Under his leadership, I am confident of the NESG's sure-footedness for the task ahead in advancing Nigeria's economic reforms. Niyi will be assisted on the board as first vice chairman by Mr. Osagi Okumbo, the chairman Shell Companies in Nigeria, Mr. Boye Olusanya, Group Managing Director, CEO, Flour Mills of Nigeria, as second vice chair, and Hajia Amina Meina, Group CEO, MRS, as the third vice chairman. Please sit, thank you. It has been my pleasure, privilege, and honor to serve as the chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. I want to thank the Board of Patrons led by Mr. Pascal Dozier, PDG, the Board of Directors and management, the NESG corporate community, the NESG business leaders who continue to pay to serve. I also thank the Nigerian people who stood by us through some very difficult times, the media community, and our local and international partners for their support throughout my tenure. I respectfully ask, request, beg that even more support be given to me. In closing, I thank His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GCON SAN, members of the Federal Executive Council, members of the National Economic Council, the Governors Forum, and a few of my governors and ministers are here. Thank you for coming. The legislature and the judiciary for their leadership, support, and continued commitment to the public-private dialogue process throughout very challenging times. I specifically thank the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning and the Minister of State for Budget and National Planning for their support, partnership, and unwavering commitments. We have had some tough times, but our shared commitment, our bond, and our determination to do all within our capacity to ensure a better country has always prevailed. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, again, I welcome you all to the 28th Nigerian Economic Summit, and I thank you for your attention. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
That welcome statement had everything. At the beginning, it sounded more like the State of the Nation address. Towards the end, it became a valedictory speech. At a point, tears almost came out of my eyes, but my heart told me, you must be proud of this man. Let's put our hands together for him, ladies and gentlemen. When I see men like this, I remember Mahatma Gandhi. He said, the only way you can find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. You've served well. You've served well. Thank you. I'd like to welcome here a man who also believes in service. As the Minister of FCT, he was a champion of urban renewal. And Kaduna is different since he took over. His Excellency the Governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir El-Rufai, is here with us. We welcome you. The Honorable Minister of Power, Engineer Abubakar D. Aliu, is also here. I welcome you. Let me quickly announce that this event is both physical and virtual. I'd like to welcome all the virtual audience that are with us, including some of our special guests. And also here, I'm not alone. My brother is with me, Oladele Gulano. You'll be seeing him. He's more handsome with the white beards around here. And he'll be taking you to the interview center to interview you. So, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a man that understands the dynamics of the private sector and what works in the public sector. A very experienced supply chain manager with demonstrable history of working both in the oil and energy sector. Today, he is the Honorable Minister of State for Budget and National Planning. Please join us and welcome here, Prince Clem Agba.
Your Excellency, Professor Yomi Osibanjo, SAN, GCON, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Permit me, sir, to stand on the already very well-established protocol. I am delighted to give these remarks at the opening of the 28th Nigerian Economic Summit. The annual summit, as you're already aware, is jointly organized by the Federal Government of Nigeria, represented by the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, and the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, representing the private sector. The nearly 3 decades of partnership between the public and private sectors has provided a veritable platform for dialogue on reforming the Nigerian economy. I'd like to thank my brother, the chairman, Board and management of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, our partners and sponsors for their support in sustaining this annual event. Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this summit has over the years been essential to the sustenance of our national dialogue on the economy because it frames our deliberations with the context of the aspirations for better quality of life for our people. It discusses our vision of equity and social justice, and viable economic and political order we are committed to creating, and forms the basis of forging consensus by promoting and sustaining cooperation between the public and the private sectors. Consequently, since the inception of the summit, the nucleus of conversations between government and the private sector had been targeted at building a resilient, virile, and competitive economy. In 2016, the current administration, on the heels of recession occasioned by the shock in the international oil market and disruptions in the oil production in the Niger Delta, developed the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP 2017 to 2020, to restore growth, invest in our people, and build a globally competitive economy. Principally, the consensual implementation of the plan helped in making Nigeria exit recession early. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our vision and determination to change the development trajectory of our dear country has not waned. As we keep aspiring to attain the desired objectives for Nigeria's development, we built on the gains of the ERGP and successfully delivered the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025. I want to use this opportunity to thank Mr. Atedo Peterside for co-chairing that process, along with my sister, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget, and National Planning. We are currently in the process of finalizing the Nigeria Agenda 2050. Broadly, all past plans had the overarching goals of economic diversification, employment generation, infrastructure development, and poverty reduction. In addition, the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 has a unique objective of establishing a strong foundation for a concentric economic diversification, implying that the economy had already been diversified, but the focus of the plan is to deepen the diversification effort within the sectors such that each sector could substantially increase its contribution to GDP and create more growth. To do this, we as a nation need to work on our product space and also our product complexity. By product space here, we mean the collective knowledge within each sector of the economy. I'll give an example. Nigeria's cotton is one of the best cotton in the world. But in the process of harvesting and collecting the cotton, we degrade the value. So there's knowledge that is required in that sector in order to ensure that our cotton is priced appropriately. On the product complexity area, we produce quite a lot in the country, but in the primary stage. So the need to use the product space, which is our collective knowledge, to advance our product such that we will no longer have to export raw cocoa, but export processed cocoa, so that the demand for Nigerian products will be high, and then we will be able to earn the much needed forest rather than depending solely on the oil sector. The overall vision of the plan is to make Nigeria a country that has unlocked its potentials in all sectors of the economy for a sustainable, holistic, and inclusive development. The plan is designed to lift 35 million people out of poverty and generate 21 million full-time jobs by 2025, thus setting the stage for achieving government's target of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in 10 years. This plan is also unique in many respects. The process for its preparation was not only participatory and consultative, but inclusive and benefited from the lessons learned from the implementation of previous plans. It has 3 volumes structured around 7 cluster areas. Volume 1, which is the policy document. Volume 2 contains the prioritized costed capital projects, programs and projects that will form the foundation of the federal government's annual budget. The Volume 3 deals with the legislative imperative identified as binding constraints to plan implementation and has identified 8 laws and 10 policies that constrain plan implementation over the years. For us, this Volume 3 is really, really important because today when you look at Nigeria's GDP, 92% of it is from the organized private sector. And this plan envisages that the private sector will be the driver of the economy. But we've got 18 laws that militate against the private sector from driving. So we have to ensure that we work on those laws. We have about 10 policies that do not allow the private sector to fly. So we say we have to work on those policies to ensure we remove the binding constraints and truly allow the organized private sector not only to drive the economy, but to fly the economy. So to this end, a technical working team comprising the Office of the President on Ease of Doing Business, relevant ministries, departments, and agencies, and a renowned legal firm has been set up to review these laws and policies with a view to enriching the plan implementation. Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the plan is underpinned by a very strong macroeconomic framework projecting annual average real GDP growth of 5%. The growth is envisaged to come from agriculture, trade, services, construction, manufacturing, communication sectors, etc. To achieve the growth, the plan has emphasized on improving our product space and complexity that I spoke to earlier. We are optimistic as we move away from public sector-led to private sector-driven plans that our long-anticipated economic transformation will be achieved. To give vent to our commitment for ensuring effective participation of the private sector, we constituted an interministerial technical committee to identify projects in the Volume 2 of the plan suitable for execution through public-private partnership. The plan has an investment size of 348.1 trillion naira and will be allocated to sectors, programs, and projects. The private sector is expected to contribute 86% of the investment, while the public sector, both at the federal and sub-national levels, will contribute the remaining 14%. Improvement in revenue is expected to result in total revenue projected at 15% of GDP by 2025. As the economy continues to recover from external and internal shocks, Nigeria's perspective plan, as the Nigeria Agenda 2050, is designed to transform the country into an upper middle income country by the year 2050. The Nigeria Agenda 2050 is formulated against the backdrop of several subsisting development challenges in the country and the need to address them within the framework of 6 5-year medium-term development plans, each comprising the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025, which is already approved, published, and being implemented. There will be a National Development Plan 2026 to 2030, 2031 to 2035, 2036 to 2040, 2041 to 2045, and 2046 to 2050. The programs and projects in the plans are expected to vigorously support development and poverty reduction through institutional structures and ensure that the enabling environment needed for the private sector to play its leading role is created and galvanized. Thus, the theme for this year's 28th Nigerian Economic Summit, 2023 and beyond, priorities for shared prosperity, is timely, and as I've outlined earlier, we have laid out the foundations that points to these priorities for shared prosperity in the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 and the Nigeria Agenda 2050. What we need at this point is for the private sector to leverage on the opportunities of the various sectors as government unlocks the economy for growth and development. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am persuaded at this junction to place on record our deep appreciation to His Excellency, Mr. President, for the proactive step set in motion by his administration at the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, the worst in the 21st century, to debunk the prediction that Africans will be dying on our streets. Rather than come to fruition, the impact of the deadly pandemic on both the economic and social fronts were not too severe in Nigeria. Mr. President proactively set up 2 presidential committees. The Presidential Task Force, which handled the protocols and chaired by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and the Economic Sustainability Committee, which focused on the economy and how to ensure that Nigeria did not have a U-shaped recession, but V-shaped. This committee was chaired by His Excellency the Vice President and produced the Economic Sustainability Plan that led to the rebound of the economy and also mitigated the severe impact of the pandemic on the citizenry. Another giant stride to the credit of Mr. President is the transformational feat recorded in infrastructure development. Prior to Mr. President's emergence in 2015, the infrastructural stock relative to GDP was put at 25%, and this has grown to 35% in 2020, based on the survey that was carried out in the Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan. Following the huge investment by this administration, the infrastructure stock is currently hovering around 45%. All these are not only salutary, celebratory, but worthy of commendation, to say the least. I have since learned that you monitor what you expect, because if you don't monitor what you expect, you will get what you do not expect. And you agree with me that it is better for 200 million Nigerians to monitor our projects rather than just 30 staff members of the Monitoring and Evaluation Department monitoring those projects. I recall sometimes 2 years ago, there was a social media news that I think it's a legislator commissioned a world-class bridge somewhere in the south-south where I come from. And the pictures that I saw were that of a wooden bridge. Can those type of wooden bridges across a river be said to be world-class? Certainly not. This underscores the need for us to have citizens monitoring projects for us. So the government has developed a web app which we have christened the iMac. Eyes should see and hands should be able to touch and feel what government is doing, rather than just earmark and citizens just hear what government says they wish to do. The iMac has geospatial capabilities. And that is to say that if a Nigerian citizen were to monitor a project, they can take photographs of what they see. It will come to us geotagged with latitude and longitude, so we can tell on the face of the earth where that project is. So I encourage you and all Nigerians to download the iMac on your phone. Just go to imac.ng. And you can monitor projects around you or in your states and make your comments so that appropriate action can always be taken by the government. Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, once again, I thank you most profoundly for your kind attention. I wish us all fruitful deliberations. God bless you. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
God bless you too. Thank you very much for your work for Nigeria. We appreciate you. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this event, like I said earlier, is being streamed live, and so you can join us in hashtag shared prosperity or hashtag Next28. And most of these sessions will be translated to 5 languages: Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, Pidgin, and French. And so, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, let me welcome here the Honorable Minister of Finance, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget, and National Planning. Honorable Minister, please.
The Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, may I have your permission to adopt the already very well established protocols? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and excellencies that are here. It is my pleasure to be amongst all the distinguished guests that are here today to deliver this opening statement at this important occasion of the 28th Nigeria Economic Summit, which is jointly organized by the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning and the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. Let me start by joining my brother to extend our sincere appreciation to His Excellency, Mr. President, for his continuous support for this program, and also His Excellency, the Vice President, for consistently supporting us in hosting the Nigeria Economic Summit. As you're aware, the collaboration between the ministry and the Nigeria Economic Summit Group has evolved and provided the platform for regular dialogue and engagement with the private sector, with civil society, and with development partners on contemporary socio-economic issues in our country. It is therefore in recognition of the importance that the federal government of Nigeria attaches to the summit that we work closely with the NESG to further consolidate and deepen this partnership. This relationship is also further strengthened by an MOU that is in place that guides the work that we do together. The partnership is also boosted by the participation of His Excellency the President as well as His Excellency the Vice President. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, during the last year's summit, the summit, if you recall, had the theme, Securing Our Future, the Fierce Urgency of Now. During that summit, we had an opportunity to review development issues such as reversing poor economic trends, improving the human capital base of our economy, mitigating security challenges, and laying the necessary foundation that will advance Nigeria into a future of high and sustained inclusive economic growth. During the summit, I highlighted the various steps taken by government to sustain economic growth. Amongst the initiatives are a reorientation of our national values and a radical shift in citizens' attitudes to taxation and public financial management, and also the prioritization of investments in critical soft and hard infrastructure across the country, including roads, railways, schools, as well as healthcare facilities. In addition, I also informed the conference of our efforts in ensuring the delivery of the successor plan, the ERGP 2017 to 2020, and the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025. The plan was developed, approved by the Federal Executive Council, and graciously launched by His Excellency Mr. President on the 22nd of December 2021. We are currently finalizing the country's perspective plan, the Nigeria Agenda 2050, to replace the Nigerian Vision 2020, which lapsed in December 2020. We're in the second year of the implementation of the Medium Plan 2021 to 2025, with the private sector clearly taking the lead. So although challenged by a shortfall in revenues, government kept its pact by prioritizing capital funding in favor of critical ongoing infrastructure projects in power, rails, roads, agriculture, health, and education sectors. This is with a view to strengthening the Nigerian economy post-COVID-19. Resources are also being mobilized with less emphasis on oil revenues. As we implement the National Development Plan, the financing from government will continue to rely going forward heavily on domestic resource mobilization from the non-oil sector through the results of the implementation of the Strategic Revenue Growth Initiative of the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, as well as the Annual Finance Acts. This process will improve and further diversify government revenues and entrench fiscal prudence and enhance value for money. This year's summit, titled 2023 and Beyond, Priorities for Shared Prosperity, this theme was carefully chosen to provide direction for stakeholders to examine the progress that we have made so far during this administration in terms of achievements in policy implementation of programs and projects encapsulated in the National Development Plan for 2021 to 2025. Over the next 2 days, we will have an opportunity to examine how far we have gone in terms of implementation of the strategies. We have also an opportunity to look at how far we have gone in terms of achieving sustainable economic growth and development, as well as achieving the set priorities for our shared prosperity beyond 2023. The discussion will be dimensioned along 4 sub-themes, and this includes 1, delivering macroeconomic stability for shared prosperity; 2, investing in the Nigerian future; 3, unlocking the binding constraints for execution; and 4, reframing the agenda for transformational leadership. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we move into our discussions, it is important to note the achievements of this administration. This includes transformational investments in infrastructure to restore our national railways and road networks. Completed projects will be complemented by ongoing investments in light rail, narrow and standard gauge rail. Airport terminals also have been completed in Lagos, Abuja, Kano, and Port Harcourt, and presently the Abuja Airport runway is being reconstructed. Other investments in airports include the safety facilities and aeronautical meteorological service delivery. Work is also going on the development of seaports and auxiliary infrastructure to the ports. Our efforts to ensure efficiency in the power sector has led to the partnership with the German government under the Presidential Power Initiative. Government's intervention in 4 distressed electricity distribution companies and the reconstitution of the board of the Nigerian Electricity Liability Management Company. Under the Energy Transition Plan, efforts are also being made to transit from our reliance on oil derivatives to gas as a transition fuel, as we also increase the new renewable sources such as solar and hydro in our energy mix. We are focusing on unlocking the economic potential of the non-oil and high employment generating sectors to achieve sustainable and inclusive development. Reforms in agriculture are yielding results, leading to an improvement in net earnings of rural farmers to the sum of 174 billion naira in the areas of cassava, rice, sorghum, maize, as well as cotton production. We've also enacted into law the Petroleum Industry Act 2021 after close to 2 decades of inaction, leading to the commercialization of the NNPC Limited and other reforms in our energy sector. His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari has also signed into law executive orders on promoting procurement by government agencies, promotion of transparency and efficiency in the business environment in 2021 and beyond. But suffice it to note that despite these achievements, the desired impact must be transmitted wider across the citizenry. This transmission has been constrained by several factors, which include the challenges of insecurity, a rising population growth rate, the fiscal impact of the subsidy on PMS, as well as reduction in oil revenues due to theft and vandalization. I want to assure you that government is taking action to address these challenges. For example, the recent increase in oil output as security agencies address this criminality in the affected oil-producing sectors to leverage on the ongoing reforms. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, one of our primary commitments is to ensure that the economic framework for our nation's development is in place. I'm pleased to inform you that the draft Agenda 2050 is currently at its final stage of work and will be launched soon by His Excellency, Mr. President. The plan seeks to increase the country's per capita GDP from the current $3,500 per Nigerian to $33,000 per Nigerian by 2050, and also place Nigeria amongst the rank of upper middle income countries. The plan will be implemented by subsequent governments through 6 5-year medium-term national development plans, as well as the annual budgets that should be drawn from the plans. The Nigeria Agenda 2050 has a moral imperative to lower the poverty and unemployment rate significantly, as this is the only way we can ensure sustainable and broad-based growth. Let me reiterate, the present administration has invested and continues to invest in several initiatives to improve the quality of governance and the well-being of the Nigerian citizens. We've committed to improve infrastructure and reduce the harmful effects of corruption. The commitment of this administration to improve the standards of living of the population and build an economy where growth translates to development remains unshaken. While appreciating the Joint Planning Committee for all their efforts in organizing this summit, and I'm confident that the outcome and recommendations of these discussions will not fall short of explanations. I want to use this opportunity to congratulate the outgoing chair of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, Mr. Asue Ighodalo, and welcome the incoming chair of the NESG. I therefore want to end and say that I'm really anxiously looking forward to the outcomes of the discussions of this summit, and wish every participant here a fruitful engagement in this 2-day process. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. Our next gentleman is a man with over 50 years of business exploits. He is referred to as the patriarch of entrepreneurs. Please welcome with us Mr. Pascal Dozier, Pioneer Chairman, Nigerian Economic Summit Group, for his keynote address.
Your Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria, other excellencies, please permit me to stand on the existing protocol. Your Excellency, before I go into my keynote address, I would like to make 2 requests. Please indulge me. The first one is to acknowledge and remember 3 of our founding fathers who left for the beyond within the last 1 year. Chief Ernest Shoneko, Dick Kremer, Alhaji Ahmed Joda. There were 3 key founding fathers of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, and I would like us to give them 1 minute recognition and wish them well with the Almighty. Please indulge me. May the souls of Chief Ernest Shoneko, Alhaji Ahmed Joda, and the Kremer rest in peace. Thank you. The next request is a pseudo-entertainment. I would like you to listen to this lyric. It is a lyric from Scotland called The Old House, of a man who left his country, and later on when he returned, there was such changes that he found it difficult to continue. I'd like you to listen to it, if you don't mind. Step it down, as they say in electric power supply, and see whether it resonates with us. Think about it, ponder about it. We might find some useful knowledge or experience from it. Please, can that be played? As The Old House.
They call back to memory those happy days of yore. Gone are the old folk, the house stands deserted. No light in the windows, no welcome at the door. Here's where the children played games on the heather. Here's where they sailed their wee boats on the burn. Where are they now? Some are dead, some have wandered. No more to their homes shall those children return. Lone is the house now, and lonely the moorland. The children are scattered, the old folk are gone. Why stand I here like a ghost and a shadow? 'Tis time I was moving, 'tis time I passed on.
I hope you enjoyed it. Your Excellency, when I was approached to deliver this keynote speech, naturally I inquired as to the topic I should speak on. I believe I heard, you are at liberty to choose your subject. This liberty or freedom to choose, if you will, was the beginning of the challenge. Questions such as, where do I start from? What subject do I speak on? Continuously raced through my mind. Should I choose to speak in the abstract or stay with the real life space? If I stayed in the abstract, I would be venturing into an uncharted space where I do not have much competence. If I decided to stay on the real, down to earth space, the temptation for me was to dwell on either banking and finance or management of the Nigerian economy. Yet, I also ran into problems because there's practically no aspect of the Nigerian economy that volumes have not been written about by various experts. Same goes for the banking and finance sector. But as I thought about it in my mind, it took me back to the words of the song you've listened to, The Old House, which incidentally was written 30 years ago in 1992. The same year, a few colleagues of mine, led by Chief Ernest Shonekan, who was then the interim chairman of the interim national government, who was also the convener of the first summit. We looked at the trajectory of our economy, Nigeria, the economy of our country, and knew that we were heading in the wrong direction. So we decided to engage with the military administration at that time, and this led to the convening of the first Nigerian Economic Summit in February 1993, and subsequently the establishment of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. I must also acknowledge the support of the government of the day, led by General Ibrahim Babangida. His government participated fully with us, and there was established then a very good rapport between the private sector and government. So, given the dilemma of choosing the right topic for this keynote address, I had no choice but to seek refuge in the many hints and constraints that the NESG smartly imposed in the invitation letter. First of all, I would like also to thank the chairman of, well, I wouldn't call you the ex-wild chairman, Asue. You're still the chairman as of today. So I thank you and your board for giving me this opportunity to present this keynote address. Maybe of the founding fathers, I'm one of the last of the Mohicans. The hints of the summit group was as follows, very clever. One, explore the theme 2023 and beyond, priorities for shared prosperity. It didn't end there. Number two, in addition, one is enjoined to and I quote, reflect on the similarities between the current socioeconomic situation and those of 1992, as the summit promises to A, articulate the agenda for incoming leaders in 2023 and beyond. But most tellingly, the opening plenary is focused on the Nigeria we want. I found that interesting. The Nigeria we want. I like to suggest out front that just as we are doing here, the starting point for whoever leads the country in 2023 should be to seek answers to the cui bono question, where must I begin to start repositioning Nigeria? The answer to this question would help the leader and the team and his team to, one, prioritize issues, since reality shows that there would be multifaceted challenges seeking urgent attention. So many challenges, each seeking immediate remedies. Where does he start? Second, determine what path Nigeria may follow to the quest to join the League of Developed Nations in the 21st century. Determine the necessary balancing act between the pursuit of brick and mortar issues, things like infrastructure, artifacts, and the like, and the soft issues, things like knowledge, rules, and ethos that provide guide rails for infrastructure and national development. The answer to these questions would require deep, reflective, and forthright thinking that would task even the best among Nigerian leaders. Fellow compatriots, ladies and gentlemen, against this background, permit me, therefore, to tweak the focus of this opening plenary by arriving at a topic, instead of the Nigeria we want, to the Nigeria we need. I was telling some of my friends that there is an adage in my area which says, if you want to recline, you first of all sit down. Because if you try to recline on a chair, before you sit down, then you are caught in for trouble. I think that want comes after you have gotten your needs. I am deploying this topic because one is mindful of three interrelated maxims associated with needs and wants. Firstly, one, a need is an essential requirement or necessity, so that non-fulfillment of needs can lead to adverse outcomes. Two, the fulfillment of needs is essential for survival, whereas fulfillment of want is not. Three, needs may not change over time, while wants do, and wants may differ according to different individuals. It is subjective. After sketching out the needs we need, my intervention would highlight why we haven't fulfilled such needs. The paper would then round up by drawing attention on how to begin to bend the curve to get the Nigeria we need. So, what's the Nigeria we need? The answer to this question need not be far-fetched. After all, our national anthem, Old and New, adopted by our founding fathers and subsequent leaders, have succinctly captured the national mission statement, goals and objects. In the likely event that we may have forgotten, permit me to refresh our memories along the following lines. 1. The national anthem adopted by the Founding Fathers at Independence 1960 drew attention to the fact that, and I quote, "Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand." At another line, the anthem enjoined us to hand on to our children a banner without stain. They didn't define what stain meant. So that is for us to decide what stains are. Because if you don't know what you're going to hand over, it will be difficult. The same anthem rightly concluded by asking God to help us to build a nation where no man is oppressed. The accent here is to build a nation. By the same token, the current national anthem, which came into force in 1978, requires Nigerians, and I quote, to serve with heart and might one nation bound in freedom, peace, and unity. In the second stanza, we are required to, and I quote, help our youth the truth to know, in love and honesty to grow. Finally, the national anthem again admonishes us to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign. So it is clear that the Founding Fathers and the rest of us have lofty dreams for this country. From the foregoing, the Nigeria of our dreams may well be encapsulated along three interrelated lines. Firstly, a strong and united nation bound in brotherhood despite our diversity, a nation where no one is oppressed or discriminated against on account of tribe, sex, religion, or status. 3, and arguably the most telling vision, or red line, if you will, is to build a nation, where no one is oppressed, where peace and justice shall reign, and in the process, help our youth the truth to know, the very essence of teaching the youth truthful national history. But experience teaches us that national anthems are at best mission statements, intents, and dreams. In other words, anthems are not an end in themselves. Furthermore, the operative phrase, to build nation, suggests the need to build a nation state out of multiple ethnic nationalities. The action of building or constructing a nation state is continuous. See, even older nations don't rest on their oars. For instance, even after 2 centuries, the US leaders are still driven by the quest to build a more perfect nation. Even so, nation building, or the art of constructing a nation state, always requires undergirds that enables the realization of the intents and dreams encapsulated in such statements as national anthems. Constitution, laws, and policies, which experts have variously dubbed basic norms, institutions, or rule of the game, provide such undergirds. Reminiscent of physical building, constitutions and rules of the game act as foundations which nations are built. In the circumstance, if there is a misalignment between intents and undergirds, nation building would be difficult. Some experts go far as positing that with misalignment, nation building, national development, and national progress will be a mirage. So why haven't we realized the Nigeria we need? Whereas there were reasonable provisions in the 1960 independence and 1963 Republican constitutions to undergird nation building in a plural society like ours, that republic was unfortunately cut short. And the military regimes that followed the 3 decades up until 1999, but by the 4-year civilian interregnum of 1979 to 1993, it bequeathed to the country what such administrations are usually associated with. First, the suspension of the Constitution, along with its nation-building underpinning provisions. 2, authority was always established by force and violence, with attendant negative impact on people's rights. Thirdly, problems were often solved by issuing more decrees, by setting up more bureaus and agencies, and charging people for such services by adding tax burdens or appropriating more revenues, while ignoring direct taxation of the citizenry. In the process, the typical citizen-government relationship that taxation usually engenders was badly eroded, with attendant nation-building frustrations. It was against this backdrop that NESG held the first summit in February 1993. Tellingly, as I mentioned earlier, that date, the country was in deep crisis. What with the following facts? A hitherto fledgling democracy and rapidly developing economy of the years early 1960s had been emasculated by 3 decades of government by decrees. 2, a general election that was considered fair to usher in democratic governance was annulled. 3, political and civil society activists agitating against the annulment of the elections were being harassed and exiled or forced into exile. 4, the polity and economy were spinning into chaos, instanced by urban violence and lawlessness, especially in Lagos, the country's commercial center and bellwether state. 5, macroeconomic environment was in the doldrums. Inflation rate at 44.59% in 1992. It jumped to 57.17% in 1993 to 12.58 annual change. Basic infrastructure, including electricity, transportation, water, and telecommunications, were at backwater standards. 6, corruption was rife, with consistent Transparency International Corrupt Index as top 3 most corrupt country. Poor and negative GDP growth, 0.36% in 1991, 4.63% in 1992, minus 2.04 in 1993, and minus 1.1% by 1994. 7th, the second ASU strike in history, 1992, well after the first such strike in 1988, resulting in ASU's second ban in August 1992, only to resume strike a year later in July 1993, following lifting of the ban. 8, crisis and conflicts in the oil-rich Niger Delta region had reached a watershed, with the 1993 murder of the Ogoni Four, the 1995 subsequent trial, conviction, and execution of the Ogoni Nine by the FGA, which resulted in the suspension of Nigeria from the 54-member Commonwealth of Nations. So, the key Bodo question may well be, are there parallels today? That's one of the things NESG wanted me to talk on. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, because I do not want to join in lamentation only, let me acknowledge upfront that we have made progress from those heady days of the 1990s. Let's highlight a few, shall we? 1, we will do well to remember that barely 2 decades ago, private universities were illegal. Today, we may well have a surfeit of them. 2, add this to the fact that in less than a decade, we moved from a practically primitive telecom country with one of the lowest teledensities in the world to sophisticated teleservices and one of the fastest growing telecommunications markets in the world. 3, we are also enjoying the benefits of telecom IT add-ons, including internet banking, banking reforms, comparatively cashless economy, Internet of Things, social media and the like. And shouldn't we relish the very fact that with 22 continuous years and counting, this is our longest spell in democratic political governance. Warts and all. I said warts and all. Why? Because, if you permit me to say, Nigeria is full of illusions and delusions. I call it illusions of democratic governance. Those who are governed think we have democracy. Those who govern us think we have democracy. When we are asked to define democracy, we say it is government of the people, by the people, for the people. It means that sovereignty resides with the people. Does it reside in the people? In Nigeria, the democracy we practiced, from me, my understanding as an observer, is that democracy in Nigeria, the sovereignty resides with the state, not with the people. Think about it. Now, if you want to treat this, what we have, with levity, just cast your mind back to where we are coming from. So what we have so far is better than what we had. But is it the best we should have? You may also want to visit countries where dictatorships and governance by decrees is still the order of the day, to know that we are not that bad, but things could improve. Fifth, the things that happened in the since early 1990s, the 1995 Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission Act that supplanted the 1972 and 1977 Nigerian Enterprises Promotion Decree, which hitherto restricted foreign ownership of firms and foreign direct investment flows in Nigeria. It remains a watershed in the promotion of the private sector. The Foreign Exchange Monitoring and Miscellaneous Provisions Decree, number 17 at that time in 1995, which opened the country for foreign direct investment. The introduction of AFEM, Autonomous Foreign Exchange Market, these were all indicators that Nigeria was open for global business. One couldn't be prouder for the role of NESG in some of these monumental and significant developments. Sometimes people say NESG is just talk and talk and talk, but if you look at the monumental achievements in terms of policy formulation in those days, in these things I mentioned, NESG played significant roles. So kudos to NESG. Now, if NESG could make these contributions under military regime, much more should be expected under the civil regime if given the opportunity to contribute. And I'm glad that listening to the Minister of Finance telling us how they are cooperating, I think the future is bright. I think so. Don't you? We don't have to rehash, but we must confess first, the parallels between 1992 and 2022 are troublingly similar, and that's putting it mildly. We don't have to rehash this here. They have been duly established elsewhere, and they stare us in the face. Unfortunately, even a democratic setting that trust between the government and citizens is yet to be strengthened. And I was happy to listen to the minister and what they are planning to do jointly between the private sector and government. I think it's an admission which had been lacking before, that the private sector ought to be helped to develop. Now that the government has realized this, I think the future is bright. So, how do we begin to bend the curve? Set an agenda for leaders in 2023 and beyond, and in the process, get the Nigeria we need. I like to sketch out my views on a 9-point interrelated postulations along the following lines. 1, we will do well to accept that democratically established and rule-based governance systems are more enduring compared to dictatorships. It follows that those good rules of the democratic game, effective constitution, laws, and policies duly negotiated and agreed upon by the people or their representatives are more readily acceptable. Getting constitutional provisions and laws right are so vitally important that over 200 years ago, one of the founding fathers of the United States of America, Thomas Jefferson, opined that the two enemies, and I quote, the two enemies of the people are criminals and government. So let us tie the second down, that is, tie the government down with the chains of the Constitution so that the second will not become the legalized version of the first. Need I say more? Two, our founding fathers agreed for independent Nigeria to be a secular state for good reasons. In a plural, multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ethnic country like ours, multi. If the state, nation state and its federating units act in a way that promote any religious vintage above others, that would be sowing seeds of discord. This disturbs cohesion, progress, and development. It therefore follows, for instance, that the use of public funds to sponsor persons on religious events, building of places of worship, and the like, contradicts the secular nature of Nigeria, as agreed by the founding fathers at independence. Ours is a secular state and must be seen to be so in normative, positive, and practical terms. Three, we must be a federation, not just in name, but also in nature and in deed. In line with more successful, enduring, and plural nation states, including such countries like the US, UK, Canada, India, Brazil, Nigeria must strive to shape legislative leads and powers to make laws such as to have relevant tiers of government to be responsible for those issues that they, the tiers of government, are best suited for. It therefore follows that the exclusive, concurrent, and residual lists in the Constitution needs reworking for a more efficient and effective federation. Four, ours is an economy that urgently needs a positive regulatory environment that is private sector and business enhancing. We can't overestimate the need for this. Because one of the things you find if friends ask you, what are the key possible determinants or that create problems for Nigerian private sector? It is the uncertainty. Uncertainties in the system. It is also the regulatory problems. Our regulators should think of themselves people who are meant to enhance the development of the private sector and not like people waiting for somebody to err and then you strike. It therefore behoves the government to depersonalize institutions by leveling the playing field and making it attractive to investments, both local and foreign. This depersonalization of Nigerian institutions is very key because if you don't depersonalize the thing, we should be process-led and not just determined by individuals. It presents uncertainty in the economy. Our education system needs to unify and not divide, and must meet development challenges of the 21st century. The current figure of 20 million out-of-school children are time bombs that are already detonating. This can be seen from egregiously high crime rates and various conflicts bedeviling the economy. So, how do we begin to reverse the trend? And how do we recover, train, and equip those that have passed the formal school age to be productive and fend for themselves? This must be in the front burner of leaders come 2023. Experience also informs us that curricula for schools is much more important in nation building than the ownership of education organizations. For instance, we need to find better ways to institutionalize affirmative actions to lift the vulnerable and less endowed as against the current unity schools system, which implementation now has the unintended consequence of dividing instead of unifying family groups and Nigerians. Equally important is the question, how do we structure our school curricula to be more amenable to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, fondly called STEM, are judged variable drivers of the 21st century economic development. 6, we must deploy more inclusive and development-enabling institutions over economic extractive ones. Whereas inclusive institutions, including land titles and vulnerable groups and social safety nets for the poor, bestow equal rights and enable equal opportunities, voice, and access to resources. Extractive economic institutions permit the elite to rule over, exploit, and extract wealth from those who are not in the elite. In the circumstances, the EEIs, that is extractive economic institutions, stymie national cohesion and development with attendant debilitating effects on social cohesion and development. Arguably, the most debilitating economic extractive institution arrived in Nigeria in 1978 via the Land Use Decree. Subsequently, the Land Use Act. Ever since, an avowed public good intention has had the unintended consequence of imbuing the elite, including state governors and powerful people, to take over and allocate private and communal lands to themselves and their cronies. In the process, citizens are denied their heritage with attendant negative impact on agriculture by small and community holder farms, poverty alleviation, and wealth creation, all to the detriment of economic development and social cohesion. In the circumstance, after over 4 decades of unintended negative consequences, the time is ripe for a comprehensive review of and amendment of the Land Use Act. I'm happy we have some of our legislators in this forum, and I think they should study it and see whether my opinion is correct or not. The detriment it has caused and continue to cause in Nigeria. 7, ours is a polity that's crying for urgent solution to the insecurity bedeviling this country. As a fundamental principle of nationhood, regardless of the cost, we must deal with threats to our national security, violence, attacks, terrorism, war, espionage, in a smart, transparent, accountable, and coordinated manner. 8, Nigerian leaders and citizens must appreciate the very fact that whereas economic and social infrastructure, electricity, transportation, water, housing, health, and the like play important roles in catalyzing development, freedom of choice, and associated soft issues are inalienable rights and therefore central to human development and sustenance. Very often we downplay the soft issues, but they are very important in determining the cohesion and the well-meaning in the development of a nation. For instance, despite the best intentions of Colonel Gaddafi's Libya, where among other freebies, electricity was available everywhere and free, home ownership was a human right and was provided, education and health care were available and free, farmland was available for free for agriculture, the Great Man-Made River Project, the world's largest irrigation project, made water available free to citizens. Even so, the regime ended violently. One may argue that this was not totally internal, and there were other exogenous factors. But the rest couldn't have happened. This couldn't have happened if the citizens were very happy. Citizens were happy, and therefore they could have played into the hands of foreigners who didn't want the regime to continue. The rest is negative or positive reminiscence, depending on which side of the divide one appreciates. 9, and finally, I therefore like to conclude by reiterating that the Nigeria we need is one which was envisioned, negotiated, and agreed upon by our founding fathers, to wit, a democratic, federal, secular Nigerian nation-state in which relevant groups mutually agree on rules of engagement on an equal keel, where ethnic groups may differ, but respect and harness the good in each other, which we hand over to our children by teaching them the truth about our history in a nation-state where no one is oppressed and our young ones will no longer be forced by circumstances like in the old house to wander and scatter, or as they say now, to Chaba. So help us God.
You know, in the entertainment and sports industry, there is an argument going on about the GOAT. They call Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Lewis Hamilton GOATs in their different sports, or even Roger Federer. And GOAT meaning greatest of all time. But the Nigerian business industry also have its own GOAT. In the business space of Nigeria, the man who just left here is the greatest of all time. And I looked at him, a bit frail, but the voice resonates. So doctors say anything can age in your body, but the voice remains evergreen. May God bless you, sir. I'd like to welcome Dr. Mohammed Mahmoud Abubakar, Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. I welcome you, sir. And also here with us is a banker, philanthropist, investor, and founder of the Aigboje Ike Mokwede Foundation. Mr. Aigboje Ike Mokwede, you're welcome too. I welcome you. Very quickly, without much ado, let me welcome His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GCON, SAN.
Thank you very much. Please sit. Your Excellency, the Governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir El-Rufai, Your Excellency, former Governor of Ekiti State, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, Honorable Ministers present, special advisors, the Chair and Board of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, our keynote speaker and pioneer chair of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, Mr. Pascal Dozier, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. But before I continue, let me join others in commending and congratulating my brother and a true patriot, Mr. Asue Godalo, the outgoing chair of the NESG, for a remarkable 2 terms in office, and to also warmly welcome his vice, Mr. Nii Yusuf, who seamlessly succeeds him. And from one vice to another, let me say how happy I am that you do not have to go through an NESG primaries. I bring you the very warm greetings of Mr. President, President Muhammadu Buhari, who I know has sent his apologies ahead today. It's a pleasure, of course, to join you at this year's Nigeria Economic Summit. Over the years, the summit has become the forum for high-quality engagements amongst thought leaders, captains of industry, civil society, and decision makers in the highest echelons of government on the economy of our country. And we must again commend the organizers for their tenacity in not only ensuring that the summit holds and has held unfailingly for 27 years, but also for maintaining the depth and breadth of interactions, always with remarkable objectivity and a high sense of responsibility. The theme for this summit, 2023 and beyond, Priorities for Shared Prosperity, calls on us to reflect on what our priorities should be to attain inclusive prosperity from 2023 and beyond. And this is an important question, especially given the frightening headwinds of the past 3 years and the emerging local and global trends that will most certainly define the future. We are, to borrow an expression, buffeted on all sides. Local security and economic challenges, global turbulence on the political, economic, and social fronts, the Russia-Ukraine war and tensions amongst great powers, all of these impacting food prices, impacting macroeconomic indices, and of course disruptions also to democratic governance here and there, especially in West Africa. The global economy is yet to recover fully from the effects of COVID-19, especially debts that were racked up to cope with the economic slowdown, and there is continuing disruption of global supply chains. Added to these, of course, are all the existential challenges around climate change, especially droughts, flooding, and we've seen the very severe consequences of that in many of our states here in Nigeria. So given this background, it's clear that our work is cut out for us and that we have to choose our priorities very carefully going forward. There are, of course, a whole gamut of things that require our attention, and many have been well captured, not just by some of the comments that have been made already and some of the remarks and speeches that have been made already. But we also have a comprehensive documentation, as the Minister of Finance has said, in our National Development Plan 2021 to 2025. But permit me the liberty of sharing just one or two of these priorities. I cannot, of course, be anywhere near as eloquent as Atador Peterside in his submissions on the low-hanging fruits. Neither can I even be anywhere near as direct as some of the things that he suggests. But I must say, that I look forward eagerly to joining you also on that side, where I can, on an annual basis, insult the government to my heart's content. But the first of these, some of these indicators, is the improving macroeconomic conditions. I think on the positive side, the economy continues to grow with GDP growth at 3.54%, as we've heard, in the second quarter of this year. Non-oil revenues are also up, and they continue to improve, especially since some of the initiatives in the Finance Act. For instance, the increase in VAT from 5% to 7.5% led to an increase in revenues by as much as 69% above the target for 2021. While also in the same period, corporate income tax increased by 15.5% above target. Customs duties also went up by 10% above target. And independent revenues of our government were up by 17.8%. So there's, a fair amount of good news. But it is still our revenue challenges that heighten the notion that we have a major debt problem, which is rarely the case, which is really not the case, beg your pardon, given the fact that our debt to GDP ratio is just 23%. But it's also true that what matters right now and what matters and what will matter is our debt service to revenue ratio, which is undoubtedly high. But I think that it is in increasing revenues that must engage our attention, and that's really what we must focus on. We've already seen real improvements, as I've mentioned, in non-oil revenues, but our focus must now be on productivity or encouraging value addition. Productivity and value addition means creation of traceable value, tradable value. It means jobs and opportunities, and it means more tax revenue. To increase productivity, we must free up our environment for business. And I think it was Professor Ogun who mentioned that government needs to create the environment, get out of the way so that the private sector can do its business well. And that, I think, is true, because we must create the environment for business to make local and international trade easier by fixing our ports, effecting the national single window, revamping our customs processes and tariff codes to reduce delays and arbitrariness, removing needless restrictions on imports to enable value-added processes, etc. Of course, our exchange rate regime remains an issue of some concern. The discussions that we must have, shorn of sentiments, is how best to manage the situation by finding a mechanism for increasing supply and moderating demand, a mechanism which will be transparent and which will boost confidence. And I'm sure that we can, recall that the central bank has in many, some years back, been able to do so by means that were not necessarily perfect. Your interbank foreign exchange market, for example, retail dot option system, wholesale dot option system, all these price discovery mechanisms which at least were transparent, evident for all to see, and they worked. So I think that what we should be looking for is not necessarily any perfect rules, but we must certainly prevent a situation where we have the kind of arbitrage that we have. And the way to do that is really to increase supply. Demand management, obviously from everything that we've seen, is not working. It is important that we focus on increasing supply. This will boost confidence. It will increase the confidence of local business. It will increase the confidence of our foreign investors as well. People need to see that they don't have to, as has been suggested, that they don't have to have any particular reason, have any particular attributes to be able to access foreign exchange. So I think that's important for us to look at how to do something serious about our foreign exchange systems. Going ahead of that, I also think that it is time for us to look at the other issues that must concern us and require urgent action. Inflation, for example, needs to be tackled head-on because it is both, as economists will say, a tax on the poor, and of course it disrupts long-term growth. Inflation, as has been said, and I think one or two have mentioned it, is in our country today is partly structural, arising from infrastructural deficiencies, etc. But then there's an aspect that is also caused by increased money supply, imported inflation, and depreciation of the naira. In addition, therefore, to the monetary measures that have already been undertaken by the Central Bank of Nigeria, for Food and Jobs Program. The Agriculture for Food and Jobs Program was one that we began to implement under the Economic Sustainability Plan. And the whole idea was that we sought to support small-scale farmers by guaranteeing uptake of their production through enabling bigger farmers and suppliers to manufacturing companies and commodity exchanges to support them across every stage of production. So the small-scale farmer is actually involved in a value chain where he's supported by larger farmers, and we ensure, government ensures, that these farmers are given the right inputs through the small-scale farmers and access to credit. All of these have worked and can work better, of course, with a great deal more attention being paid to them. It's now evident, and I think that what we've seen, especially in the past few years and the past few months, that we can actually, and the focus of the Ministry of Agriculture has shown us that we can actually do a lot better. Yes, if you look at the figures, the growth figures of agriculture, yes, we can see a slack there, but that already, in my view, is being addressed, especially by some of the innovative things that have been done now by the Ministry of Agriculture, especially in improving the lot of private farmers and trying to get inputs across to them as quickly and as efficiently as possible. It's now evident also that as a global issue, there is possibly none that will impact local economies as profoundly as climate change. But it bears repeating, as we keep saying everywhere, and African countries have repeated this and drummed this in the airs, especially of the global north, that African countries, including Nigeria, did very little and are doing very little to cause the global warming. And of course, as we've seen, the recent flooding in our country, in Nigeria, and in several other parts of the world, shows that we bear the brunt of climate change, despite the fact that we're not responsible for the warming itself. I mean, we're possibly the least emitters of carbon anywhere, at least as far as our globe is concerned. We must continue to call for a just transition that enables us to use our abundant resources to meet our energy needs, especially electricity and cooking. This will enable us to secure the resources needed for investments in natural gas, as well as in renewable forms of energy. One of the key things, of course, that I'm sure you've heard a lot of is the move to defund gas projects all over the world, or the move to defund fossil fuel projects all over the world. But for the problems in the war in Russia, the war in Ukraine, beg your pardon, would have had a situation where this was actually carried into effect. But I think the global northern countries themselves have realized that they also need gas, especially for their own energy needs. And so have continued to fund gas projects, at least in their own economies. So I think it's a time for us to insist that we cannot do very much without gas projects being funded, public funding of gas projects, by traditional funders and by the multilateral institutions. As well, Nigeria should continue to work alongside the G77 and China partners on the issue of compensation for loss and damage. This is essentially requiring that those who cause climate change, or those who are the greatest emitters, should also pay to help those of us who are the least emitters to overcome the challenges of climate change. I'm happy that this matter is on the table at COP27 now, which is going on, as you know, and it should be pursued to its logical conclusion of securing additional finance for developing economies. At the same time, we must include some of the excellent ideas around debt for climate swaps in our toolkit, especially our climate finance toolkit. These swaps can be a win-win for debtors and creditors alike. They will increase the fiscal space for climate-related investments and reduce the debt burden for participating developing countries. For the creditor, the swap can be made to count as a component of their national determined contributions, or the NDCs. But yet another priority in the discussions around climate change, which is also important for us economically, is the idea of unlocking the potential of carbon markets, especially in Africa. In short, voluntary carbon markets, which of course many of us know, work by the purchase of carbon credits by corporations in the developed world to offset their own emissions. The African Carbon Markets Initiative was launched again at COP27 just last week, and it has been estimated that Nigeria could produce more than 30 million tons of carbon credits annually by 2030, and bringing in more than $500 million annually. The future are the jobs and opportunities that come not just from voluntary carbon markets and from all of the other adaptation and mitigation options that are available to us, but also the fact that we can, as we reduce emissions, as we control the climate, control all the difficulties around climate change, we can also grow. We can also develop our economies. The future of the green economy is one that we must take seriously. There's no reason at all why we should not take advantage of renewable energy. Renewable energy for us is a plus. We have the best radiation across the world, and especially in many parts, in the northern part of our country, we have some of the best radiation. In fact, across the country, radiation is excellent. So we can take advantage of renewable energy, especially solar. And we must press our advantage there. We already have the Solar Power Niger program launched under the ESP, which is designed to connect 5 million homes to solar power. We also have off-grid there. We have mini grids as part of that whole, as part of the options that we have. And Nigerians will contribute to all of this. It will be helpful for us in job creation, helpful for us in advancing growth in so many other ways. But the impact is perhaps more in the manufacturing opportunities and maintaining some of these equipments, especially the solar equipments. And there's a whole range of what has been achieved in that respect, but time constraints would prevent me from going much deeper into that. Another key priority area for us is to leverage the disruptive technologies offered by digitization. And I don't think that we can speak enough about the potentials that the digital economy holds for us. Digitization is now upon us and is different from previous advances in technology because it has become a general purpose technology affecting every facet of our lives. But we are, as everyone keeps saying, at the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, resulting from the increasing economic viability of advanced robotics, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, Internet of Things, cloud computing, big data, etc. We've already seen the impact of digitization in fintech in Nigeria, and the story of how our young people have managed from 2015 to now, between 2 recessions, to create 6 unicorns, companies valued at over $1 billion each. And that is no mean feat, considering that they have done this, they've done this despite the economic challenges and the economic difficulties that there are. But we must also remember that the reason why this was possible was because of some of the innovative developments, especially in licensing of fintechs, licensing of financial intermediary companies that have enabled these fintechs to be able to operate without necessarily becoming banks that require 25 billion share capital. And I think some of that innovation, a lot of it coming, of course, from the central bank, have helped a great deal in giving some fillip to the way that these companies have grown. So the importance of technology, the importance of regulation, and this is very, very critical here. Regulation is important, and we must be ready to adapt quickly, especially with respect to technology. A lot of the regulations that we're seeing have never been seen before. A lot of the changes we're seeing have never been seen before. So we must be at the cutting edge of regulation. We cannot use the same old regulations that we used prior to some of the technological developments that we're seeing. We can't use those same regulations today. And so we must continue to involve the entrepreneurs and innovators as we develop these policies. And we must build on these achievements because they give us the opportunity to leapfrog. We must build on the achievements of our fintech companies and our innovators, especially in the areas of agriculture, health, education, logistics, and even manufacturing, housing also, and some of what we're seeing in the development of smart power grids. The last but one priority issue I'd like to mention is improving our social safety programs. This government introduced the most comprehensive and resourced social investment program in perhaps the history of our country. Something this program has helped to do is a bottom-up approach to economic thinking and even budgeting. It's also helped us to implement a wealth and opportunity creating environment as opposed to mere poverty alleviation. And I think that we need to take a second look at our social investment program, especially with respect to wealth creation. A lot of the components of our social investment program have done exceedingly well. And they've really added to the several options that we have for economic development. But I think it's also time to upgrade, it's time to move forward, and it's time to look especially at how we can hone the wealth creation aspects of our social investment programs, especially with respect to inclusivity, especially with respect to giving people in the hinterland better opportunities, better access to credit. And access to credit is so important. What we've discovered in our social investment programs, especially as we try to get money across to the poor and get credit across to the poor, is just the problems with inclusive financing, the problems that are associated with trying to get your resources to the last mile. And of course, our banking system is just not moving fast enough for that. But the good thing is that technology has helped a great deal. And on the back of technology, we've been able to reach the farthest places in our country, but we must be able to do so much faster and with greater impact. We are far from the objectives that we set for ourselves, but we have begun, and I believe that we must move forward. The last priority I will mention on this occasion is the need for more intentional and focused investment on our youth, especially in globally marketable skills, access to credit, protection of intellectual property rights of innovators and inventors, and access to global markets. A lot of the complaints that we hear, especially from young innovators around access to credit, these are issues that we must work on. And protection of intellectual property is extremely important. Of course, we see a lot of investors coming from different parts of the world, investing in the digital space, and of course, compromising the intellectual property that should ordinarily accrue to these inventors or innovators. So there's a need for us to look at these issues more carefully and to invest more in creating the right environment for young people who are doing some of these incredible things to grow. I trust that some of these issues will be given deeper attention in your discussions at this summit and perhaps tomorrow when some of the panels meet. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the task ahead requires partnership, innovative thinking, but most importantly, disciplined implementation. And we on the government side look we look with great anticipation to all of the conclusions that you will make today, and of course, to all the valuable recommendations that this summit will make. On this note, it is my singular honor and pleasure on behalf of Mr. President to officially open the 27th National Economic, 28th, I beg your pardon, the 28th National Economic Summit for the benefit of all Nigerians and to the glory of God. Thank you.
While he takes his seat, can we put our hands together one more time for His Excellency the President, Vice President? Very quickly before we close, we will have the group photograph, and then we'll have the national anthem. His Excellency the Vice President will visit the exhibition stand, and then we will break for the interactive session or the breakout sessions. Let me welcome here the chairman of the NESG. Please step up here. Let me also welcome all the founding fathers that are here, Mr. Atedo Peterside, Chukwuma Okolo, and Mr. Pascal Dozie to also join us up here. The honorable ministers that are here, Honorable Minister of Finance, Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Minister of Industry, if he's still around, the Honorable Minister of Agric, the Honorable Minister of Power, the Honorable Minister of Mines and Steel Development, let me welcome Your Excellency, the Governor of Kaduna State and the former Governor of Ekiti State, to please join us here. Okay, can we have the national anthem now, please? The national anthem.